Today I'm really pleased to be joined by Sabina Miah, an English teacher and researcher whose work asks searching and really important questions about the current state of English education in England. Sabina trained on the PGC programme with me at Goldsmiths and has since developed a fascinating research project examining the impact of GCSE English Language reforms on teachers' pedagogy and classroom practice. Now, for listeners outside England and those less familiar with the changes, GCSEs are the major examinations that most students in England take at 16. Over the past decade, English GCSEs have undergone significant reform. Coursework has disappeared, terminal examinations, if I can even say it, dominate the assessment, and perhaps most controversially, spoken language or Oracy has effectively become unweighted. In other words, students may complete speaking assessments, but these no longer substantially contribute to final grades. Critics argue that these reforms have narrowed the curriculum and increased pressure on teachers and students and have shifted English teaching away from creativity, exploratory discussion and authentic communication towards performative exam preparation. Others argue reforms have increased rigour and standards. Sabina's research explores these tensions from the perspective of teachers themselves. Her main research question asks, what is the impact of GCSE English language reforms on teachers' pedagogy and practice? We'll be exploring in this podcast what teachers feel has been lost and again through these reforms, and whether they still believe in the utility of this qualification, and what happens to classroom culture when Oracy is marginalised. But we'll also discuss Sabina's own journey as a teacher, what she learned during her PGC year, possibly, how new teachers survive and grow within pressured systems, and how mindful approaches to English teaching might still create spaces for reflection, creativity, and genuine dialogue. Sabina, welcome to the podcast. I think, the first segment I would like to talk about is really about becoming an English teacher, if you could, and then we'll move on to the wider questions about GCSE. But I think English teachers have very personal reasons for entering the profession. It's rarely about grammar or exam results. There's usually a story behind it. Maybe you could tell us a tiny bit about yourself and how you became interested in English teaching.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor and I really appreciate your time and being here. First of all, I wanted to become an English teacher because I understood the importance of being able to express yourself verbally in written form and in conversations, just like being able to express yourself because I was a super shy child. And once I learned how to kind of break through and learn how to express myself, I wanted to instill my values through my students basically and just support them.
Brilliant. I mean, were there any particular books or teachers or experience that shape your relationship with English growing up?
There is one teacher that comes to mind, I think, in during my A levels, and even though I didn't do well in it and I had to retake it, that teacher was just so kind, um, and really made us feel heard. And she made a massive impact on me, and I actually returned to that school and I told her that, and we were both just crying happily, which was really sweet.
That's such a wonderful story. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, worth it. The podcast is worth it for that story alone. Thank you so much.
And how
Um,
about yourself? I wanted to ask. I know this is your podcast and
Yeah, I mean, not to linger too long, but I think my connection with literature in particular was what I loved. I loved William Blake's poetry, and I fell in love with some of Shakespeare's plays, and with reading. I'm much older than you. Grew up in the 1980s, and I books like Catcher in the Rye, and other books really just totally transformed my life. And I'd actually also say kind of the sort of rock pop stars of that era. John Lennon was shot when I was, about 12, and I got really into his work. And he kind of has an English teacher kind of vibe, really, with a lot of what he does. Yeah.
Definitely. I remember back in when I had to be interviewed to be a part of the PGCE program, we had to deliver a hypothetical lesson, I think, on one of Blake's poems,
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Chimney
London.
Sweeper,
Yeah.
I think it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's great. Um, Yeah, I mean, what made you decide to train to be a teacher? And any thoughts on that and the PGC program at Goldsmiths? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I've always wanted to. I felt like I had something to do in schools. Like there was something
Yeah.
for me to do, but I didn't know what. So I would volunteer. I would be in and out of schools, and just like out of
Mm,
curiosity, I wanted to see like what are they learning, what are they doing, why did I hate school so much, and
yeah.
how can I
Yeah.
make it better for them? Um, and then it just started from there. Like took there was a volunteering program at University of Westminster, and then Goldsmiths um really stood out because of the staff, the location, and just how kind and open the whole institution seemed.
Great. Oh, that's lovely. I mean, was there a moment in the PGC where you really felt yourself becoming a teacher? I know it's a roller coaster year, isn't it? Where you kind of have ups and downs, don't you?
Yeah, I'd say towards the end of my placement,
Yeah.
because my second placement, only towards the end, because I was still trying to form my teacher identity and um setting boundaries at work, but also my personal life. So
Mm,
yeah, with time, and a lot of support from the university and my mentors, then yeah.
yeah. Okay, great. Uh, is there any kind of aspect of the course that really influenced your thinking? Any kind of
Um,
reading or assignments or, kind of, yeah, anything.
I think the Spire assignment,
Mm.
I don't
That's the
remember what that
research
stands for.
assignment. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I didn't do well in it at first, and I had to redo it because I found it so challenging writing at a master's level.
Mm,
But it really got me thinking about like why I wanted to join teaching in the first place, and I was able to transfer and use like my experiences as a
mm.
young person to like what is happening now as a working professional, and look into the need for literacy and critical thinking skills.
Yeah, yeah, great. Well, that's fantastic. Did your understanding of teaching change once you entered the classroom full time?
Yes, it felt like a battlefield.
Right.
Yeah, it felt like every everything I had to do was is like calculated.
Yeah.
Over time I built some sort of like teacher autopilot, but it came at the expense, I'd say, of my
Mm,
health.
right.
So yeah, but at the same time, those little interactions with the students and getting to know them made it very worthwhile.
Okay, great. What your biggest shocks or discoveries early in your career, would you say?
Um, I think the expectations on staff, like
Yeah.
needing to do this as a tutor, but also as a teacher, and also
Mm,
contacting home and doing all of that somehow
yeah.
during the school day, which is not possible. So it's that um the
Yeah.
expectations to take
Yeah.
work home all the time. And only a year after I started teaching, like we didn't take exercise books home, but that meant had to stay in the school for longer.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think English teachers today face different pressures from previous years, previous generations, or is it the same?
I think there's different pressures, and
Mm.
that's what it kind of inspired me to do my research for my
Yeah,
dissertation, in terms of because I never experienced the reforms made in 2010 when
yeah,
um Oracy was unweighted, and that's why I want to learn, like, what was education like before, so I can compare it to what it
yeah.
is like now as a teacher.
Yeah, yeah, and we can get stuck into that discussion. Well, now really, just transition to section two. Really, just having had a bit about yourself. Thank you so much for that. Really informative. But one thing that I think it's really important for listeners to understand is the curriculum reform isn't just a technical issue. It changes what happens in classrooms every day. It changes relationships, priorities, even teachers' sense of themselves. So, tell me what initially drew you. You've said a bit, but anything yet to add? You know, what drew you towards researching GCSE English language reform?
I just always thought, when I was teaching, it became increasingly clear for me that the students that were sort of being left behind were of a similar demographic, or
Mm,
disadvantaged, basically.
yeah,
And my suspicions were confirmed when I worked part-time as a
yeah,
lecturer, teaching functional skills English levels 1 to 3 and
mm,
GCSE resets. And
yeah,
the version of GCSEs that I had to teach was so robotic. It's just reduced to technique spotting, and it doesn't help that mostly young men,
yeah.
were completely disillusioned and unwilling to complete the exams.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's well. I mean, maybe before we get stuck into sort of looking at how pupils respond to the reforms, could you just briefly explain what changed in reforms, or you and I can do it together, and why they became controversial? I'm happy to chip in too, but
Yeah,
your thoughts are good to begin with.
definitely. So from what I understand, it the reform changed a lot of the GCSE subjects. It So there were no more controlled assessments in class that were completed by the teacher. Any I know more for English, the changes. There were now closed text exams for literature, so you weren't
Mm,
allowed to use the text anymore. You have to memorize the quotations. And then, more importantly, which I want to focus on, is making oracy unweighted. So
yeah.
I think you had to do a group debate. You had to deliver a speech in front of the class and act something out, which
Mm,
was all part of the
role play.
oracy. Yeah. And
Mm.
then now we only do a speaking and listening, which is a speech. And we have to convince the students and say, like, we have to do this as compulsory, but in reality it is unweighted now.
Yeah, it goes on their transcript, doesn't it? It
Yeah,
says that
it
they've
does.
done it. It's sort of ticked off that they've
Yeah.
done it. Yeah. Um, in your view, are your pupils aware of these changes? Are they aware of how much, things have changed?
Not at all.
No.
Whatever they have to learn, we just have to, like, persuade them and say,
Yeah.
this is it. And
Mm,
it
yeah,
could be
yeah.
helpful. It could, in some ways, it is helpful for their future, like public speaking skills.
Yeah, I mean, they have this kind of formal speech they have to give, don't they? And yeah, there's three tasks, aren't there, they have to do. Should we just recap on those?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you want to say what
W-
they are?
What three tasks, sorry?
Is it three tasks they have to do? Sorry, I need to. Is it they only have to do a speech now?
Yeah,
Is that right?
it's only a
Only
speech,
a
and
speech.
I feel like that's the only time they
Right.
can edit
Yeah.
and um like improve their work over time. That's the only
Mm.
time and place they could do that.
Yeah, because I obviously I did teach the new, or what's called new GCSE when I first started teaching. Actually, it was 100% coursework, and a lot of
Okay.
it could be oral. You know, you could deliver talks, and then they switched to having 20% of the mark being speaking and listening for English language. And yeah, there were three major tasks. That's why I'm getting confused. Sorry. And you're
No,
right.
no.
You know, there was a role play, there was a speech, and a debate. You know, typically, but it was a lot of freedom for the teacher to decide what to do, and you could base it around what they were reading in class. Yeah, no, and you as a teacher were trusted to give the mark, although you attended sort of moderation,
Hmm.
watched other scoring of other ones, and then people would observe you and check that your marks are okay. So it was very different in that sense. Yeah. I mean, 20% isn't a huge amount of a mark, but it was enough to, you know, motivate students, I would say.
It seems like it. I wanted to ask about the 100% coursework.
Yeah.
Um, what are your thoughts on that? Was it useful at all?
Well, I found it. I started teaching in Tower Hamlets in the school that was then called Sir John Cass, now called Stepney All Saints, I believe.
Okay.
And yeah, next to Stepney Green. And I found it amazing. You know, students were able to decide. We did. Students wrote their autobiographies,
Oh,
and you know, took some time to hone them. They wrote a story, you know, and again edited it and got it right. They would write a kind of critical essay. So we did, because my school was based in the East End of London, they did a critique of EastEnders and they compared the myth and the reality. And they loved that. That was one of the best pieces, and we got commended by the inspectors on that. Um, and then they could do, you know, a variety of sort of spoken pieces, and they could be assessed for their hot seating, their debating. Um, yeah, it was a very different environment. I guess when I started teaching, the school league tables only just been introduced, so there's
oh.
less pressure on teachers to get, in quotes, great marks. You could actually give an honest mark, as it were, you know. Whereas now, I mean, I think one of the problems with the speaking and listening that happened was there was a lot of pressure on teachers to get a good mark, or to, you know, inflate, as the authorities saw it, inflate the speaking and
Hmm.
listening mark. So, you know, that I think that's why it sort of got rid of. But yeah,
Yeah,
the
I think that
students.
was. Oh, sorry.
Go on, you carry on.
No, I was just gonna say, I think that's one of the re justifications for the reforms to stop
Mm.
the inflation of grades and any cheating. Do you think that took place at all? Or
I
could it
mean,
be,
I've got to be
could it have?
honest that I do think that it wasn't, I wouldn't call it cheating. I think like teachers were under pressure to give the highest mark possible to children, and then of course, you know, uh, in some cases, in some schools, you know, essentially some teachers were sort of giving the outline of what to write for the
Oh,
students in the coursework, which wasn't great. So I think the, you know, coursework only really works if there's not huge pressure on the teachers to get amazing marks. Um, Obviously, now in the age of AI, it's even more tricky, isn't it? Because, you know, students can just use that. Although I would say, like, as a university lecturer, it's very easy to spot what's AI, and you
yeah,
just
same.
generally don't get a very good mark, you know, because it's often very uncritical and not very good.
Yeah.
You know, so, and yeah, I don't know. I don't know. What do you think? What's your view? Do you think they should bring back coursework?
Um, well, I wanted to ask you about before my answer,
Yeah.
like what was your workload like when it was coursework based?
Um, it. I was a organized teacher in the sense that, I would, as soon as I got some marking in, I actually stayed in school and always finished my marking in school. So I was on top of it, but you did need to be very organized. It was, the workload's quite significant, isn't it? Um, I would do a lot of editing stuff with students in class, so they
That's good.
would work on their pieces, workshop them, and we'd discuss. So it wasn't like going through my red pen and rewriting coursework. Some teachers did do that, but their workload was unmanageable because they were basically writing the pieces for the students, and I didn't do that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that makes sense. In terms of coursework, I do think there needs to be some sort of aspect of coursework. So, because I feel like the process of editing, improving, and things taking time is lost because
yeah,
English language papers 1 and 2 is based on like extracts, unseen
yeah,
extracts, and
yeah, yeah.
writing in very constrained time pressures.
Mm. I mean, I would say, like, we did a bit of this in the training for you, that it is, I think, and again, it depends on your school. It is important for children, for pupils to get used to reading unseen work and discussing it and then responding. I would call it reciprocal teaching, so they learn and hone their skills. And so they will then do better in their exams if they do that. But I can see that I've observed a lot of classrooms where there's a lot of silent working, and they're basically just sort of dictating, learning off by heart what to write, and that using acronyms like DAForest or whatever. And I don't think that's very effective, and it really alienates the students. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, there's a lot of formulas that are used
Yeah,
in English language, and I think to a certain extent it helps maybe some of the low attaining students. They need some
yeah,
sort of structure, but
yeah,
then I feel like it limits the more able students,
mm,
and I feel like um it kind of moves away from the meaning of the English subject in terms of like
mm,
being exploratory in your response, and I think
yeah,
that's the wording of the top of the mark scheme, I think.
yeah. So it's about getting that balance right, giving a clear format for the lower attaining ones. I mean, tell
Definitely.
me, tell me a bit about what does a typical sort of English lesson look like for you now?
So now it's a retrieval do now.
Yeah,
So the kids come in silently and they complete the do now task, which is
mm,
like a recap of last lesson or last week or
yeah,
last month.
yeah, yeah,
And then they get their green pens and we go through the answers
mm,
to check like
yeah,
what they are. Then we sometimes it's an extract, sometimes it's like a literature text. We read a
yeah,
section, comprehension questions,
yeah,
some um, pair share talks opportunities as well. Like, what do you think about this character, or
mm,
what do you think is happening here, and
yeah,
all of that. Um, and then there always has to be like a chance to write and actually get those ideas down. But so like a 20-minute writing task, 15
yeah.
minute, and then we share our answers, and that's it. Time flies.
Yeah. And how do you find those lessons? Is it you enjoying teaching English at the moment, or do you wish they would change in any way?
Yeah, I'm not enjoying it at the moment. I'm
Yeah,
not. Um, the workload has become unmanageable, even
yeah,
now working part-time.
right, yeah,
That's why I do want to move into education policy to learn about
yeah,
how things came to be and what if anything, there's anything I can do to
to
try to make
improve it.
education more
Yeah,
manageable for staff, but also
yeah,
um for students.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Um, maybe do you think what's your view? Let's talk about oracy and spoken language. I mean, what do you think that oracy matters educationally? What's your view in terms of people, students talking? What's your view on this?
I think being able to have conversations and to have an opinion, to express it, but also be able
Mm,
to discuss and converse with someone that has an opposing view, and
yeah,
being able to like hold your ground is super important. And I
yeah,
don't know if you've noticed anything, but even though I trained, we trained
yeah,
during COVID,
yeah,
a lot of like group work opportunities are lost. They're very
yeah,
difficult to manage now.
yeah, yeah.
And I feel like now more than ever with technology and everything, we need oracy and to be able to, because there's also another argument. If you're able to verbally share
Mm,
your ideas, then it could help you with your writing as well.
yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, what do you think has happened because the spoken word has become unweighted and isn't graded in the exam? Do you think that's had an effect with students?
Yeah, because I feel like in English language, there's a lack of opportunity to express yourself. Yes, there's creative writing, and I think there's one good change about it in
Mm,
terms of it's the
yeah,
start of a story, which I think is a nice change
yeah,
that
yeah, yeah,
AQA introduced. But there's that lack of, I think, emotional literacy,
yeah,
empathy when reading, and a lot of the times I believe it's
yeah,
been reduced to technique spotting. What's the effect
yeah.
of this? But
Yeah.
yeah, what do you think?
No, I agree. I mean, I think that oracy should be part of every English lesson, and I do worry that children from disadvantaged backgrounds often are now more in silent classrooms or classrooms where spoken language is not prioritized, and that, often, you see I've looked at schools in more sort of advantage areas, private schools, say,
Hmm.
where there's a lot of discussion, a lot of debate. So it feels to me it's a kind of equity issue, um,
Okay.
and I do think that, you know, basically treating children from more socioeconomically deprived in areas as kind of almost robots who just need to sit silently and take notes is very unfair. And I've written about that in my research. So yeah, I think that, but it's quite difficult. I mean, as I note in my research, I wrote a paper called "The Reciprocal Rebellion," which is about a teacher in a kind of an academy, where it's all silent working and the sort of teach like a champion approach, tracking me, tracking you type
Hmm.
thing,
Track the
um,
speaker.
track the speaker. And she sort of, because she was quite experienced, she was able to encourage group work. Her students did much better than the other students because they were able to discuss things, and then when they came to the exam they were able to write genuine responses to literature like Animal Farm and Dr.
Hmm.
Jekyll.
Which are very complex texts.
They're complex texts, and you need time to discuss them and think about them before you actually just have your answer. So, but she was a very experienced teacher, and it was even hard for her to do that. Whereas if you're in a private school, say, or I've visited schools in more socially advantaged areas, discussion is kind of a natural thing, part of the process. So yeah, it's not fair.
How do you
Um,
think that came to be in terms of students needing to work quietly and like robotically?
well, I think it's complicated because when I first started teaching in Tower Hamlets, the behavior was poor, but I think, and then there's been this move to much stricter schools, which I kind of partly agree with in the sense that, you know, we did need to improve some of the discipline in schools. And I would say that the behaviour in schools is a lot better than when I first started teaching. When I first started teaching, children they would hit you, they would throw things out the window. There was a lot of violence, and I know bad stuff does happen still, but it's not nearly as bad as it was in my experience. Stuff that was acceptable when I first started teaching, like kids just hitting each other. Now, most schools you get, excluded for doing that kind of behaviour. It's not acceptable, which is good. I think they've improved it, but then I think they've gone the other way, and they've made it too silent. Children walking in silent corridors or sitting silently eating lunch. I think you need a middle way. You need to have what Aristotle calls the golden mean, like enough kind of rules and discipline so people behave, but also enough so that they actually can talk and they feel safe and they kind of, yeah. So I think you need that.
Definitely.
What do you think?
I agree as well.
Yeah,
I worked in a few academies and I didn't last long, and I don't know how the students coped with that because it's a lot of
yeah,
pressure, like
yeah,
getting detentions for not sitting up straight or not having a pen. Well, that's another thing. I don't know, but
yeah,
yeah, it's like we're policing students.
yeah, yeah. I mean, maybe we could, in your view, are there any schools that are sort of resisting these trends and that are a bit more creative, or have you not come across them?
Not really, no, because any like community schools, they usually struggle with funding
Mm,
and
yeah,
support. So they're heading towards the
yeah,
academies. So I'm not sure what the future of education looks like, but yeah,
yeah.
what do you think? I'm trying to
Yeah, I
end on a
mean, I
positive
think there
note.
are some schools that are quite, you know, in the area I live, schools like Highgate Wood or Fortismere in North London are quite creative, but they generally have a bit more of a mix of children from different backgrounds. But I think it's something, like this podcast, we're sort of, it's a goal, isn't it, that for the government to encourage more creative schools. I mean, the Labour government came in saying they would do this, but I don't think it's really happened. No, I mean, let's think. What would a kind of genuinely Oracy rich English classroom look like to you? What would be the ideal for an English classroom in your view?
Um, I feel like a lot of the time, because of how the content in English literature is so heavy, it overtakes
Yeah.
language.
Mm,
So for both in both classes,
mm,
um, it would be lovely to be able to, act out certain scenes, because I feel like
yeah.
sometimes that's taken away. In some schools, I wasn't allowed to do that, like move the
Mm,
tables back and
yeah.
act it out.
Have drama. Yeah.
Yeah, which I did at the start of my career.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and like what else? Like just debating,
Mm,
is this character redeemable or can they be
yeah.
saved? And there's just no time for that anymore.
Yeah. Because of all the content. Yeah.
Yeah, and linking it to real life. In a lot of interviews, that's what
Yeah.
they want you to say, like linking the curriculum to real life and current affairs. Um,
Yeah.
so
Mm,
being able to do that would be amazing, and promoting media literacy skills.
mm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've just got like 5 minutes left or so, but let's think about the future now. What gives you hope about English education at the moment? Any thoughts? Any hopes? I mean, you're doing this research, aren't you? And
Yeah,
taking that's a kind of hopeful thing, isn't it?
I think so, yeah. I think kids now, they're a lot more smarter. Like there's in some ways are a lot more smarter and
Yeah,
vocal. So I
yeah,
feel like that could be used to our
mm,
advantage, and but to be able to platform them in like a healthy manner. And I think um the English subject has strayed from what it could be. Like there's a lot of potential to
yeah,
what the subject could be because of that lack
mm,
of creativity, but something to look forward to. I mean, I remember there was a massive curriculum review last year,
mm,
and the Labour Party did release like policies in response to that. So it would be
yeah.
interesting to see. I think they want to introduce oracy in all subjects somehow. So I think that's one step in the right direction. What do you think as well?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think like bringing more oracy and discussion into all the subjects is really good. I agree with you. I think bringing more sort of drama and poetry and debates into English and making it more creative would be really productive. Um, yeah, I think that English is a potential to be a really engaging subject, but we can see from the take up of A level and university that a lot of children, a lot of pupils are being put off, aren't they, at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
because the curriculum, it could be a lot more relevant, couldn't it? There's a lot of the texts are very old fashioned and don't really speak to young people now. So, and it doesn't embrace the sort of multimodality of young people's lives. They could make little films, couldn't they? They could do kind of posters. They could do things that are more real world
Yeah.
in the English classroom, but they instead they're doing these very Victorian exams. What would you say to policymakers listening to this conversation? Because that's obviously an area you want to go into.
I would urge policymakers to visit the classrooms, be on the ground, and actually
Yeah,
see like what a day-to-day class looks like, and
yeah,
not a lot could be orchestrated as well, but just to consider
mm,
how can we support young people
yeah,
so they're making decisions that are well informed, and they
yeah,
can become these aspirational citizens, and all of the discourse that is used to have like
mhm,
a really good curriculum and high standards.
yeah, yeah. No, no, that's good. And like, what does kind of mindful learning mean to you personally? What learning journey are you on? It feels like you're on a really important journey as a sort of citizen, to find the kind of pedagogy, the approach to teaching that's right for the new generation. Just any thoughts?
For me, mindful learning means being reflective, being
Mm,
open and honest, um, being okay with getting things wrong, and just trusting the
mm,
process and the journey so that
mm.
eventually some sort of result or new knowledge, skills, whatever will come to light.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Sabina, thank you so much for such a thoughtful and important conversation. What strikes me about your work is it reminds us that education reform is never simply administrative. It shapes what teachers teach, how students experience themselves, what kind of conversations happen in classrooms, and ultimately what we believe education is for. And I think your research raises important questions, not just about English teaching, but about voice, creativity, dialogue, and human flourishing in education more broadly. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the Mindful Learning podcast. You can explore more episodes, articles, and resources at francisgilbert.co.uk. And thank you.